Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we'll review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Bava Batra, pages 96 through 102, Tzadi Vav through Kuf Beis. 96. HaMocher yain chavit yain. If you sell a barrel of wine, lachaviro, to your fellow, v'ich and it turned out that it was sour, it turned to vinegar. Amar Rav. So Rav's opinion is Kol Gimel Yamim Rishonim B'Shut Mocher. If it is noticed within 3 days of the sale that the wine went bad, then the assumption is it went bad in the Rishus Mocher, in the domain of the seller, and this was a bad sale that needs to be reversed. Mikan ve'elach, however, if it was noticed beyond 3 days from the time of the sale, then we take for granted there was Bishus Lokeach, that it happened, the souring occurred once it was already in the domain of the buyer, in which case the sale is not reversed, the sale stands, and the buyer just loses out because he delayed using his wine. Shmuel Amar Chamra Akatfa Demari Shavar. Shmuel says, no, wine, its fate is tied to whoever owns it and whose domain it is. And therefore, if we find out after the sale, even immediately after the sale, that things went bad, it's the problem of the buyer. He's out of luck, and the seller has no achrayut, has no responsibility to pay for it. Tzadi Zayin, 97. What about white wine? Was white wine kosher for sacrificial purposes, for the libations? Amarle al Tiryanki Tadam, we quote a pasuk that the wine should be adom, it has to be red. So from here we see that for Beit HaMikdash purposes, they used red wine rather than white. What about for our purposes in modern times, post-Temple Judaism? So there is a preference for, let's say at the Seder, the use of red wine. However, because of blood libels that existed and were often occurring when Passover coincided with Easter, and it was dangerous for a Jew to be seen with the red beverage because they could accuse you of it being blood, so under those conditions, white wine was to be preferred. Sadichet, 98. Hamocher makom lachavro makabel makom chavro lasot lo beit chatut livno o beit almanut libito. What happens if you contract to build a house for the wedding for the son of the other fellow, or a place of widowhood for the daughter of the other fellow? How big of a house, of a structure ought to be built? So as far as Rabbi Akiva is concerned, the minimalistic house is 4 by 6 amot, which is not very large. We're talking about maybe 6 feet by 10 feet, something like that. Very small. Rabbi Yishmael Amar Refet Bakar Hizu. Rabbi Yishmael says that's not a house, that's a barn. Maybe fit for a couple of animals, but not fit for people. Now, it's not surprising that you'd have a machloket between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael of this variety. Remember, Rabbi Akiva came from an impoverished background, and so he represents the plebeian class within Judaism, and to him, a 4 by 6 structure is a legitimate place of residence, whereas Rabbi Yishmael has sort of the right wing or patrician wing of Judaism, and to him, that's something that size is not for people, it's maybe for animals only, but not for a human. 99. If the path, a public pathway, was passing through your field, Nitala, and you take it for yourself, essentially close it off, V'natan lehem outside, and give it an alternative pathway to the side of your property for the general public to use. Mashanatan natan, what you've given away, and now the public can use that. But as for what you took for yourself, it doesn't come to you, meaning the public has not lost the right to utilize that space either. Essentially, what the Gemara here is saying is it's not the prerogative of the field owner to divert traffic in a different direction. Rather, he owes it to the public to maintain that opening, and whatever he gives to the public, he's now given to them. Kuf, 100. The path of the king has no measure, meaning it could be as wide as the king wants it to be. Shehamelech poretz geder, because the king has the right to knock down a fence, poretz geder, burst through a fence, lasod lo derech, to make a path for himself. Ven machim biadon, we can't stop him, we don't yell at him. Lahavdil, I'm reminded when I see this Gemara of the gap in the wall in the old city of Jerusalem. For those of you who have been to Yerushalayim, you've been to Sha'ar Yafo, Jaffa Gate. Probably most of you never went through Jaffa Gate. You went through a big opening in the wall, whether by vehicle or by foot. And why does that opening exist? Because Kaiser Wilhelm in 1898 came to Jerusalem and he wanted to go into the city on his horse. And he would not be able to do so through the gate proper because it was too low. So they knocked down part of the wall, the Ir Atikah, and he went through that way. That's what I'm reminded of when I think of Melech Poretz Geder. They could knock down the wall for the sake of the king. 101. Osa Chatzo Pimar Shel Sheish Al Sheish. When you're creating a crypt in a cave for Jewish burial, you have to make a courtyard at the opening of the cave, which is at least 6 by 6 cubits wide. What's the reason for that? In order to accommodate the casket and those who are attending to the casket to bury the deceased. So there needs to be room to maneuver for the pallbearers and for the dead body before it goes into its little nook into the side of the cave. 102. If you say to your fellow, Beit Kor Afar Nimorchalacha, I'm selling you a Beit Kor of dirt, of land. And if there were clefts more than 10 handbreadths high, or rocks more than 10 handbreadths high, in Darima, we do not count the area occupied by those clefts and rocks as part of the Beit Kor because it's not really usable. The point of the Beit Kor was for agricultural purposes, and these spaces, rocky terrain, is essentially useless. So therefore, you have to add to the overall total in order to finalize the Beit Kor. However, if the rocks or the clefts are less than 10 tefachim high, then that land is reckoned as part of the overall total. If you just say like a Beit Kor, not exactly a Beit Kor, but close to it, then even the rocks and the clefts will be included. Everyone have a great week.